Hey patrons, thank you so much for all of the support. It is very much appreciated. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished listening to The Three-Body Problem. This is book 1 of the Remembrance of Earth's Past series by Cixin Liu. I think I'm saying that right. And I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So I've got a lot of problems with this book, but the premise is so dang interesting to me, especially the ending of this book, that I'm going to end up having to give this book 3.5 out of 5 stars. I try not to give half stars if I can, but it just fits nicely in between those two categories. So that means a 3 means like and a 4 means I liked it. So somewhere in between those two. Now, I did this book as part of a buddy read on my Discord, and if you haven't joined the Discord, what are you doing? You should join that. That's like more than half of the fun of this channel is stuff going on in the Discord. We have almost like a couple thousand people on there. You should be one of them if you're not. But I try to get these buddy reads going where a bunch of us read the same book at the same time. We have chapters where we talk about them on a daily basis. And I think doing the buddy read here really helped me enjoy this more since I got to talk through things with everybody and give me a better, clear picture about what was going on. I mean, there were some complicated things going on here. So being able to like dialogue with people as I'm going through it and having questions, I think ultimately really helped my enjoyment. Before going into this book, I'm probably going to take a little bit of heat for this. I say that because I have watched other book reviews of this book, like non-spoiler reviews, kind of as I was going through, like getting towards the end of this. Kind of wanted to feel what other people were talking about on this. And I saw people getting heat for it, and they got heat because apparently this author is pro-communist. The author is Chinese and has made comments saying that, you know, communism's a good thing. And while I personally could not disagree with that statement more, I don't care about the author's political stances, no matter what they are. And I just, personally, I get that maybe this isn't for everybody, but I just don't like to judge authors based on their beliefs. I just want to read good books. I try to separate like the art from the artist. I think that's something that's, I definitely didn't coin that, but I try to do that myself. Now, if the author's horrific, and maybe this author is, I haven't like delved into it, but like if the author is like this convicted, horrible criminal, killed a bunch of people, probably not going to try to give that author money. But in general, I just don't care. I just want to read good stuff. And, to be honest, this book is pretty dang critical of Chinese history. And I'm kind of surprised. Like, I'm surprised this book didn't get more backlash in China when it came out. And I guess it shows you, like, how little I know about what is and isn't allowed in China. Because, there's a few chapters at the beginning of this book that do not paint China in a positive light. And I went back and read, like, did it get backlash? And no, because I guess, talking about negatively about the Cultural Revolution in China is not a bad thing in China. They are okay with you talking negatively about that time period. So yeah, news to me, but I like learning new stuff. So I also want to talk very briefly before we go into the review of this on how horrific the marketing of this book is, that it just outwardly tells you, literally on the cover and every description you're ever going to hear about this book, that this is an alien story, when aliens are not brought up in this story until at least 2/3 of the way through this book. I think this book would have been so much more enjoyable had I not known that. And now, as I say that, and I'm thinking it out loud, I might have DNF'd this book had I not known that, because I gotta tell you, I'm going through this book, nothing aliens going on. I know that it eventually will. And I'm like, how is that going to tie in? Because if it didn't, this kind of would have been a boring read for me. And I probably would have DNF'd it. So now I'm realizing why they did that. But I just, like, if I was committed to reading it, if I trusted somebody and they said, Matt, you have to finish the book, I would have been really wowed by that moment. I hope I didn't spoil anything for you. But it's like part of the book. It's part of the cover of the book. So yeah, it would have been more amazing had I not gone in knowing that. So, like I mentioned, the book starts out here in the Chinese Cultural Revolution, and it pretty instantly shows itself that it's going to be a hard science book. I've never read a hard science book before, and what I think that means, because I'm kind of using terminology that I'm not familiar with here, is that it's really going into like the depth of the science. It's not like, going to gloss over it. I think kind of the difference between if you're going into fantasy, like a hard magic system versus a soft magic system. In a soft magic system, it's like, this character has magic, don't worry about it. In a hard magic system, they're going to be like, this character has magic, here's exactly how it works. And this is how it works in this book. It's not going to say, there were particles that did this and don't worry about it. It's like, no, we're going to teach you science in this book. And by the end of the book, you're either going to get a lot of repetition from things you already knew, or you're going to learn a lot of new stuff. For me, it was learning a lot of new stuff. And so, it's the first time I've ever read something like this, and it was pretty great. I legitimately feel like I learned things here, which is awesome. I love learning new stuff. I actually heard from a lot of people that I was not going to like this book because I was listening to an audiobook, and that like the hard science aspects in this format don't translate very well. But I thought the audiobook was really enjoyable. Now, maybe part of that was because I did the buddy read and I was able to kind of go through these things with people. But the audiobook was great and I really enjoyed it. And I don't quite understand fully why people were warning me so much that this book has to be read in book format. It just, quite frankly, I heard some people that said like reading the book was difficult because of all the Chinese names and the Chinese terms. And, if you're not used to that, if you're from this like kind of Western culture, that can be really jarring to some readers. And I know it's like this biased thing, but I recognize it about myself that when I'm reading really foreign names, that they kind of blend into one for each other. And it's hard for me to keep track of it. But listening to it out loud, it was easier because the names do sound very different. While reading them on paper, it might like be like, oh, it's all kind of foreign and it, they might mesh into each other. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense in my head, but yeah, it kind of works better in audio format for me. So this book does a lot of jumping back and forth, kind of right from the beginning, between like modern day and this past from the Cultural Revolution. A majority of it eventually does go into the modern day stuff. I can't tell you too much more about the plot of this, except that the final third of this book really dials up the intensity and really makes this book very, very, very much worth it. So I've talked to you basically all of this about what I loved about it. And you're probably wondering, like, Matt, you only gave it a 3.5 stars. Why? Well, simply put, the writing is very stiff. And the characters, I will say this friendly, are not written well. And that's the nicest I can say about these characters. Like, every single character in this book feels like the same person with, like, really small variations. Like, clearly their names are different, but they all act the same. Everyone was very flat. I mean, as somebody that comes from reading primarily fantasy stories where the character writing can make or break the story, and in general, I find that, at least the books that I read, I'm almost always saying the character writing is really well done. Sometimes it's not, but when it's not, it's like, man, this is not great. It makes or breaks a story. And it was jarring here to read something like that, and to read the writing style itself, which it wasn't good. Really, the only positive thing that this book has going for it is the wonderful concepts, the science, and the way that the plot really takes shape in this final third of the book. And I get that this is a translated book. I get that if I were reading this book in the original language, that maybe it would have been, like, awesome. The prose might have been, like, magnificent. And I know that the translator is awesome. I mean, Ken Liu, one of my favorite writers, the author of the Dandelion Dynasty, is the one that translated this first book. I don't think he translates the second book, which is kind of weird to me. But I think maybe just translating a book is hard, and you're obviously going to lose things as you go through that transition. So, yeah, I suspect that this book is probably much better written if you read it in Chinese than reading it in any other language. But as I finish this book, I just can't figure out how this book has such high acclaim, given that the acclaim that I've read about it is from the English product. I mean, this is a book that is possibly the most popular, maybe the most influential sci-fi book that's been published in the last 10, 20 years. It won the Hugo. It won a slew of other awards. I mean, there's a TV show. There's an upcoming movie. I think the TV show is in China, let's be clear, but I think it's gotten some popularity. I mean, but I think they're making like an a movie out of this. But based on what I just read, I can't understand the ridiculous hype. It's good. It's really interesting. It feels different. But is it a masterclass? Like, I could never, ever call something that's written this stiff and with the characters acting and talking the way they do in this book to be anything reminiscent of something like a masterclass. Like, it honestly felt like this story was a prelude for the real story. A really, really, really long prologue. And, like, considering that everybody tells me that the second book is better than the first, literally every person, I suspect that when I finish this series, which I fully intend to do, I'm going to go back and say, yeah, this was a prologue. And it needed to be done to be able to tell the amazing story that we're going to get in books 2 and hopefully book 3. But I have heard book 3 is not the best one. I've heard the second one is. That's not what I want to hear. I always want to hear the final book in a trilogy is the best. That's not the case here. Maybe I'll feel differently when I end up finishing the series, which I really, really do intend to do. Because I got to tell you, the last third of this book, it's really good. Like, it goes pedal to the metal. It's thrown out these concepts. It kind of blew my mind in the way that it made the reveals that it did. It did that amazing thing where the reveals have been built up over time. You kind of saw that they were coming, but you didn't know why. I mean, things weren't matching up. You know, I don't want to ruin anything, but like, you're seeing things and you're like, well, clearly something bigger is going on. But when you figure out what that bigger thing is and why, it's like, boom. It's awesome. I love that feeling, and I really, really got it here. It was just a really long time to get to that. And, you know, not a great experience leading up to that point for me. I've heard the opposite, though. I've heard people say, like, the beginning of this book is great. It all starts to go downhill from there. But that's the beauty of books, right? We all can take something different from it and really just, you know, get our own thing out of it. And that's what I got here. I am finishing this book going, I clearly need to read more Alien books because the Alien stuff that got brought up was awesome. It really just like captured my imagination, and I want that feeling. So hit me. What awesome Alien stories are out there? Like First Contact is kind of what I'm looking for. Not just like a story about aliens. I've read those. I've read fantasy. I've read sci-fi. But this First Contact thing is fun. And I know it's not like some unique concept. And why am I just now realizing that this is an awesome concept? But yeah, I want something more that is kind of like that from the beginning and that's written in a little more captivating way. I don't need the greatest characters in the world. I know sci-fi is not really known for that, but like, I want to know what the good ones are. So I want to know in the comments, let me know, or come in the Discord and talk to me about it. So I'm going to wrap things up there. I would really like to get to the second book sometime in the next couple months and find out what all the hype is about there. Because I feel like, you know, the amazing is like just starting and I can't wait to keep going. So that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching this review. And as always, happy reading to you. Want to give another shout out to all of my patrons. With a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons. Anna G, Brian, CJ, Darren, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Miranda's Bookshelf, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Ben, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry B, Jamie, Joe, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.